So the unit we are studying is genetics. And genetics is the study of heredity, of how traits are passed down from one generation to another. So write that. So you've heard that term hereditary before, right? If a disease is hereditary, what does that mean? Katie?
Couldn't the disease run in your family?
Yeah, that it can be passed on from one generation to another. What's that blue thing over there? That design. Carter?
DNA strand?
Yeah, it's a segment of a DNA molecule. How come it's easily recognizable? What about it tells you that that's DNA? Dean?
The squiggly shape and the two little rods in between each.
The squiggly shape. Yeah, it looks like a spiral staircase. Anyone know the name for that shape?
Oh, I know. That's it. Go for it. Helix.
Close. Because it's not just one spiral,
Helix side.
it's two intertwined spirals. So therefore it is called a
Double helix.
double helix.
Boom.
Yes.
Too good.
Double helix. So we'll talk more about DNA and what exactly DNA is towards the end of this section. But for now, let's just talk a little bit about how these traits are inherited. So we talked about chromosomes way back when we were studying cells. Okay? Where do we find chromosomes in a cell? Okay?
Nucleus?
In the nucleus. The nucleus is where the chromosomes are stored. And it depends when you're looking at the cell, what the genetic material looks like. Sometimes it's all unwound, kind of like a loose ball of string inside of the nucleus. Other times it's wound up into neat little packages, okay, like a little strand. Sometimes those strands are doubled and connected, and they look like X's, such as in these electron microscope images. Okay? So those are the chromosomes, and these chromosomes are made of protein plus the DNA. So this is where the DNA is, inside of those chromosomes. And chromosomes are extremely important because they have all of the information, all of the instruction about how to build your cells, how to build you, how your body works, how the different parts interact with each other. So all of that information is stored in these tiny little things called chromosomes. And chromosomes are what get passed on from one generation to another. So in a typical, normal human body cell, raise your hand if you know how many chromosomes there are. Ada? You're just saying random numbers, Aiden?
They're all over the place. 62.
So who knows with great confidence the number of chromosomes in a normal human body cell? Come on? No, but you're closer. Because it's not 23 chromosomes. No.
Oh my God.
There's 23 pairs of chromosomes. Do that mental math.
So it's 46.
Yes, there are 46
I got first.
chromosomes in a normal human body cell. The starter church would be so proud of that advanced mental math that you exhibited there.
We're so good. We're just good.
So the amount said 23. They are found in 23 pairs. So chromosomes come in pairs. Basically, each of those chromosomes has a partner. And we'll talk a little bit more about why in a minute. A cat has 34 chromosomes total. So different organisms may have different numbers of chromosomes. Okay. It doesn't. Well, let me ask you this: how about a goldfish?
2.
Who wants to take a guess and tell me how many chromosomes would you guess that a goldfish has?
Six.
Right?
10.
10? Why did you say 10? What's your logic?
Because they're a lot smaller.
Yeah, and I asked you this question for a reason. Actually, goldfish have 94 chromosomes.
Oh, why?
So
Because they have so many fins.
the number of chromosomes
No.
does not mean anything. It doesn't have to do with the size of the organism, or how complex it is, or how smart it is. It's just sort of what has evolved. So the number itself is really meaningless. Okay, so don't think that the number means anything. So there are times when a doctor oftentimes will want to see the actual physical chromosomes that a person has. And they can do that by creating what we call a karyotype. A karyotype is basically a picture of a person's chromosomes. There are techniques that can be done, which basically stain the chromosomes of a cell, stop them at a stage when they're visible, and then they can actually take a picture of them under the microscope. And it would create something that looks kind of like this. The chromosomes have been stained with a purplish stain. You could see in this picture, they're in that phase when they look like X's. And if you were to count them up, there would be 46 chromosomes here. Okay. And what they do is they take the picture of the chromosomes. They used to do this manually. They used to take like an actual printed out photograph of the chromosomes, use scissors, cut out each individual chromosome, and try to find their partners because they come in pairs, and they match them up according to size and where that centromere is, and they'd start to put them in an order. Nowadays they do it with computers. They can just, cut and paste them basically. And they arrange them going from the longest pair as number 1 to the shortest pair of chromosomes at number 22. And they arrange them so that they can see them. They can look at the banding pattern, they can look at the numbers of chromosomes, because they can tell some things from this karyotype. Aiden?
What's X and Y?
Let's talk about that in 1 minute. So, we know, normal human body cell, there are 23 chromosomes from each parent. So, your body cells have 46 chromosomes in them. 23 of those chromosomes came from your mother, and 23 came from your father. There is one special pair of chromosomes. So you may have noticed that I said there's 23 pairs of chromosomes, but I only said numbers 1 through 22. Because then there's this special set of chromosomes. Okay? They are called sex chromosomes. They are usually placed as the 23rd pair. And there's 2 different types of chromosomes that can make up the sex chromosomes for an individual. They're called the X and the Y chromosome. The X chromosome is a longer chromosome. The Y chromosome is much shorter. Okay? Very small, contains very little genetic information. And which 2 sex chromosomes a person inherits from their parents determine their sex. Do you know what 2 sex chromosomes males have? Right? What? 2 sex chromosomes? What's that?
I don't know.
Okay. And Mom? Nope.
X and Y.
X and Y.
Oh.
An X and a Y are the sex chromosomes that result in a male embryo. Two X chromosomes results in a female embryo. Okay? So those are the sex chromosomes. So, could we get a Y and a Y?
Well, I think you could.
Can't. Anyone know why? I can't we ever end up with an embryo with 2 Y chromosomes?
Oh.
Hayden?
Is it because there's only one Y?
No? Dean?
So it's all dependent on the 2 sex chromosomes. So a male only has X and Y. He doesn't have X, Y, and Y. So it's only going to be, it can only be either X or Y. Wait, so no. So it's the Y chromosome will only make sperm with Y, and X will only make sperm with X.
You're
Well,
getting
I mean,
there-ish, I think. And that.
Isn't there X, Y, Y?
So, let's see, Katie, do you have a more concise and maybe straightforward answer to my question?
Okay, so since males have X and Y and females have XX, since the male only had so the female doesn't have any Y and then the males do, so it's impossible to have 2 Y if there's only one. And
You're very, very close. So yes. So let's look at when has to do with a process we call meiosis. Meiosis is a type of cell division. When cells divide, we call it cell division. And one type of cell division is called meiosis. And meiosis takes a normal cell with 46 chromosomes, and it produces new cells that have only half the number of chromosomes. So in humans, 23. Those cells become what we call gametes. Gametes have half the typical number of chromosomes of a body cell. So what's the typical number in a body cell? How many chromosomes?
46.
46. However, if a cell with 46 chromosomes goes through the process of meiosis, it produces cells that have only 23 chromosomes. Those are the gametes. We call them sex cells. So if we're talking about animals, they're the sperm and egg cells. Sperm and egg cells have half the number of chromosomes as a typical body cell. So if we imagine just the sex chromosomes, so we're ignoring the other 22 pairs of chromosomes. So when a female cell undergoes meiosis and the chromosomes get split, which of these, and she produces egg cells in the process of meiosis, what sex chromosome can the egg cells have? Come on? They only can get an X. That's all that's present in females. So every single egg cell has an X chromosome in it. But in a male cell, when it undergoes the process of meiosis, the resulting sperm cells, some of them will get the X, some will get the Y. Half sperm cells get the X, half get the Y. So sperm cells can vary in whether they're carrying an X or a Y chromosome because of this process of meiosis. So if this sperm cell fertilizes this egg cell, what will the offspring be? Carter?
Oh, female?
It will be female, have an X and an X chromosome. Or if this female egg cell gets fertilized by this sperm cell, Brian,
Oh, female?
also results in a female. However, if this sperm cell fertilizes this egg cell, what will the resulting embryo be? It will be male. Or if it fertilizes this egg cell, it will be male. So which parent actually determines the gender of a child?
Male.
The father, the male, yes. The sperm cell. I mean, it's well beyond what we're going to talk about, but sometimes people may have in vitro fertilization. Couples having difficulty getting pregnant, they can have in vitro fertilization where a doctor takes a sperm cell outside of the body in the lab, takes a sperm cell from the father, fertilizes an egg cell from the mother in the lab. They can actually separate sperm cells based on whether they're X or Y sperm, and then the parents can actually choose whether they use an X sperm to fertilize the eggs or whether they use Y sperm cell. Therefore, they can determine what? The gender of their child if they're conceiving through in vitro fertilization.
Is there a greater chance of having a girl than a boy?
So what are the chances of, what percent of sperm cells have X chromosomes? 50. 50% of Y chromosomes. So that's why we have equal proportions of males and females. So it's 50-50 chance of, basically, of male versus female. Now, just so you know, these karyotypes, these pictures we're talking about of the chromosomes, they're often created by they're often done for a fetus as it's developing to diagnose certain chromosomal abnormalities that could be present. And they do this by the process called amniocentesis. Basically, they use a very long needle. They insert it into the pregnant mother's, through her abdomen, through the skin and muscle, through the uterus, into the amniotic sac, and they withdraw some of this amniotic fluid that surrounds the fetus. That amniotic fluid actually has cells from the fetus in it, and so they can use those cells to make the karyotype. And doesn't harm the fetus or the mother, it's relatively safe. But they will do this sometimes if they're checking for any chromosome abnormalities, which we'll talk about in a minute. Dean?
I have a couple questions. So
Okay.
first, with doing this amniocentesis, can't you also determine the gender by doing that?
Yep.
Or do they usually do this to determine gender or ultrasound?
Typically a parent wouldn't have amniocentesis unless there were some suspected problems that they're looking for. So, but with amniocentesis, you can tell for sure the gender of the child.
Right.
With ultrasound, where you're basically taking basically a picture of the fetus in the womb, it can be wrong. They can misidentify male versus female.
Alright. And
They wouldn't do an amniocentesis just to determine the gender.
okay. In the amniotic fluid, aren't there also stem cells in that?
Yep, well, there's some stem cells. Yeah, stem cells are cells which have the capability of reproducing into any type of body cell. And stem cells are commonly used in research and for medical treatments and some interesting, we won't get into the details, but interesting uses of stem cells. Now, we said a typical normal human body cell has 46 chromosomes. There are instances in which a person can be born with an incorrect number of chromosomes. Sometimes during meiosis, the sperm cells that are produced, or the egg cells, may end up with an extra chromosome. And if one of those sperm or egg cells is involved in fertilization, it can result in an embryo with an extra chromosome. Okay. And that may not sound like a big deal, having just an extra chromosome, but it actually results in a whole series of physical and developmental difficulties. Okay? The most common chromosome abnormality is Down syndrome. So Down syndrome is caused when a person happens to be born with an extra chromosome in a specific spot. If you look at these karyotypes, which show two individuals with Down syndrome, Jake, do you see the difference?
Yeah, 21.
Yes, it is the 21st chromosome. So when a person has 3 21st chromosomes, that's what results in Down syndrome. Another name for Down syndrome is trisomy 21. It's 3 21st chromosomes. There are other chromosome abnormalities. It's called a non-disjunction when the chromosomes don't split, but sometimes trisomy 13 is another type of chromosome abnormality. Klinefelter syndrome or Turner syndrome are also non-disjunction disorders. Katie?
Is there a reason why it's always the 21st?
That's just so, because each of these chromosomes carries specific genes, information about certain traits and characteristics and ways that our body works. And so when we talk about a person having Down syndrome, there's a whole host of different changes that happen in their body due to the genes that are encoded on that 21st chromosome. And so that's what leads to the typical things we involve with Down syndrome, is that it was named that for that group of differences between a person without that extra 21st chromosome and with it. A person with trisomy 13 would have different differences from a person with Down syndrome versus a person with 46 chromosomes.
So, could like the parent have 3 21st chromosomes, but it not affect them, and they wouldn't know and pass it down to their kid, and they have?
No, so if a person is ever born with 3 21st chromosomes, they know it, it's obvious, it's clear, because this is like, you know, all of our traits, all of our characteristics, all the information is in just 46 chromosomes. And so having a problem with one of those chromosomes has a whole host of different impacts, so yeah, you would know. But it is possible for a person with Down syndrome to produce normal sperm or egg cells and be able to give birth to a child that has a normal number of chromosomes. Okay? So it's not common, but it is possible. Okay?
Can animals have these?
Yep, animals can have non-disjunction disorders as well, yep.
So Down syndrome is not hereditary.
Well, a person with Down syndrome would have a higher likelihood of producing sperm or egg cells with an improper number of chromosomes. So I guess in a way it could be. What really Down syndrome is risk factors for having a child with Down syndrome, age is the biggest. So the greater the age of the mother or the father, the more likely they are to have a child with Down syndrome. And like if you go to the doctor's office, the obstetrician's office, often they'll have a chart showing like what the risk is of parents of different ages having a child with Down syndrome. Basically, it looks like you know, an increasing graph with age. As the mother gets older, chances increase significantly. All right. Oh, so I don't know if you wrote that up there. So Down syndrome, 3 21st chromosomes. So just to summarize when we talk about karyotypes. Karyotypes show, what do they show? What are we looking at? What are we seeing in this picture? Grady?
A map of a person's chromosomes.
Yeah, person's chromosomes. Picture, a map, a diagram showing person's chromosomes. Now it's a little bit more of a challenge, but you can tell from this karyotype, is this person on the right, the karyotype on the right, is it a male or a female? Carter, what do you think?
Female?
Okay, but they're not labeled X and Y, so how did you know that?
Because I took this 1/3, and since they're the same height, only the female has the same height.
Yeah, exactly. We can tell because if they're the same size, those are X chromosomes. Okay? We can also see they're much larger than these last sets of chromosomes. Those are the X chromosomes. The Y chromosome is very, very small, the smallest of all the chromosomes. So if you look at this karyotype on the left side, Olivia, is this a male or a female over here?
No.
Yeah, it's a male. We see the chromosomes, the sex chromosomes, are 2 different sizes. This is the tiny little Y chromosome. Also, this person has a chromosome disorder. What is it, Alex?
Down syndrome?
How do you know?
Because there's 3 21st.
Yeah, if you look at the 21st set of chromosomes, there are 3. All right, let's finish up here today with this last slide. So this is what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. Okay? Genetics is the science in which we study inheritance, the passing of traits, the passing of genes from one generation to another, from parent to offspring. And this handsome gentleman here is who we call the father of genetics. His name is Gregor Mendel. And Gregor Mendel was an Austrian monk, a religious person. And besides his religious duties, he also was a hobby botanist, grew plants, and studied them pretty carefully. Kept very, very detailed notes and records. And came up with some interesting discoveries and saw some patterns in his research that we know today are the basis of inheritance. What Mendel was using in his research was pea plants. How many people have grown peas in their backyard? You know, they grow on like vines, sort of. And peas are pretty easy to grow. And what he did is he crossed the pea plants. He basically cross-pollinated them very carefully. He grew the resulting seeds, and he looked at the characteristics of those seeds, okay? Keeping very detailed records. He was looking at things like the height of the plants, the color of the flowers, the color of the peas, lots of different things. 7 or 8 different traits is what he was researching. And he came up with some relatively simple conclusions. His conclusion were that these things he was observing, these traits, like the color of the plants, the height of the plants, they were caused by 2 factors, he called them. We would call them genes today. That the height of a plant is caused by 2 genes. And one of each gene came from each parent. Now he was studying plants. So there were no sperm or egg cells per se, like we were talking about. But what were the gametes? What were the sex cells in the plant? What's the male sex cell of the plant?
Slide.
Something with an egg.
It's produced in something with an egg. Pollen. Pollen and ovules. Remember when we studied plants?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah, sure.
painful.
So therefore, each sex cell, each gamete contributes one factor, one gene to the offspring, which will eventually determine its traits, its characteristics.